Welcome to the Chef Fit Podcast, episode 46. We are back off a very long layoff, and today's big one, folks, chefs, women and children of all ages. The mental health epidemic in the service industry and the hospitality industry, that's what we are going to be diving into. But first and foremost, we'll go through the foreplay here because I haven't seen my man in a long time. POBG,
it's been a while since I seen your face live and in the flesh.
This is our first podcast since I've moved to Australia. I've been here a while, but we're obviously settling in, letting ourselves refresh, and now we're back with some fucking tasty episodes. So yeah, happy.
How's the life change go? Like how does that work out when you're in the middle of so much going on that all of a sudden, bang, you're the other side of the world?
It was tough to adjust at the start. Definitely tough to adjust. There was a bit of fucking anxiety there. Just apprehension at the start of kind of going like, fuck, how's this going to go? You know, the time zone difference. Because I'm very routine and I'm very structured on a day-to-day basis. Like my weeks kind of, they're very similar to each other. So like in Chef Fit, in the elite group when we're coaching, like the round tables are at the same day, same time. The Cam's Corner videos that I do are at the same time. The coaching posts that we do are at the same time. I'll do my live videos for the Facebook page and the fucking Instagram, and I'll write my emails and send them off to anyone that subscribes to the Chef Fit list. Like I'll do that early doors, you know what I mean? And I'll do it at the same time every single day. So it works in blocks. And when I came over here, we're 11 hours ahead of all of the shit. Like the majority of the chefs in the elite are, you know, 90%. Well, yeah, probably 90% are UK Ireland. You know what I mean? So it's like, fuck, how am I gonna spin this? How am I gonna get it done? But I think a lot of the time you build up shit in your head a lot more than it is. Obviously you and the lieutenants have been extremely helpful in jumping in and filling gaps wherever it needs to be filled. And yeah, other than that, once we settled in after a week or two, it was fairly turbulent. Fucking shite Airbnb we stayed in for a week with no oven, and then they brought in an oven that didn't fit, so they put the oven in the middle of the room, so we're kind of sitting there cooking on one convection hob. It was like, this isn't what I thought it was going to be at all.
Death.
Mental. That's death. Absolute death. So yeah, very frustrating there. Got a really, really nice apartment for a month, and then it was like fucking Christmas. Christmas was on the beach.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And I also see you're in a Gracie Academy doing the jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I went back the other night. Yeah.
Was that hard to find a place that was it far from you? Like, is it?
I did a bit of research before I came over. We're in Melbourne. So Melbourne's a pretty mental place in terms of there's a lot of shit here, you know. I did my research. Your man was surprisingly, the day that we arrived, the week we arrived, I went to meet him. And it was like 5 or 10 minutes away from the place we were staying. It was like fucking grand. A guy called Ben Hall. And if anyone that doesn't know or doesn't follow jiu-jitsu or MMA or anything like that, he's a Carlton Gracie black belt. So that basically means the Gracie family are like the ultimate jiu-jitsu family. They're Hoist Gracie won, UFC won, and brought jiu-jitsu to the world. The jiu-jitsu is massive now, and it all stems from the fact that this family from Brazil, who basically brought it to Brazil
in a garage,
and then they came and did the UFC, the first one that came out, and they dominated initially, and that jiu-jitsu then exploded around the world. So anyway, this guy basically went to one of the founders of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and became a black belt underneath him, which basically makes it very, very hot shit in the grappling world. So we had a school around the corner, cool as fuck, really nice guy. Went in for my first session the other night, and I bottled it for the first 2 months because I went to be in and I was like, oh, I'll be in on Monday. And I put my hand up. Ella fucking, you know, wasn't feeling great. I was in bits with work, buried myself with hours of work and just basically made excuses for, fucking not the right time, this and that, which is somewhat true. But at the end of the day, I didn't get in when I should have. So I only got in the other day. Second session last night. And yeah, fucking feeling it, man. But loving it being back. You know, really, really loving it being back. Like obviously with the chef.
You've got your routine back going. You've got work back on. Like your work stayed on track the whole way through. I'd say that was the main factor for getting back on track so quickly? Because, you know, with your business, you don't exactly have, it's not exactly holiday time when you're off because the wheels keep going. So once you found a gym and got the jiu-jitsu going, you start to settle back into routine and normality kicks in. Is that the way it goes?
Yeah, big time. I think you just have to fucking double down. I think with anything new, as soon as you go to a new place or a new environment, there's always going to be a degree of like, fuck, this doesn't feel normal, because human beings are creatures of habit. We get so used to routine, and when that's thrown out of, you know what I mean, out of whack, you're a fucking fish out of water at times, you know. When we arrived over here, I basically buried myself before Christmas because I had to rebuild a lot of things for Chef It. You know what I mean? Rebuild a lot of our marketing, rebuild a lot of the fucking, just even our message, like who we were trying to help, and going back to the foundations of things, which is very arduous stuff. It's difficult to do. It's fucking quite painstaking. You have to do your research and all of that. But I think in burying myself for that couple of weeks, I found my routine very quickly. You know what I mean? Whereas I had been just pissing around and kind of going, okay, well, look, I'm in Australia and I'm still on holidays. Maybe it would have been different and I wouldn't have settled as quickly, but we have settled. It's funny, like you could fucking, Australia is very similar to back home. It's just the fact that it's not snowing outside right now, and it's well, actually it's been pissing rain here the past day or two, but for the most part the weather is fucking
been pissing rain here for the last 7,000 years.
Absolutely sick. Oh man, that's fucking brilliant.
So what have you got in store for us today, Cam? Mental health?
Yeah, so today's episode, mental health is an epidemic in this industry, and especially with chefs. It's, I suppose, in the past year or two, that it's very much, not that it's coming to light. In my opinion, I think it's been glaringly obvious for a long time that there's a serious mental health problem in this industry that's not really being addressed. But I think people are kind of becoming more aware of this in the last year, 2 years, 3 years. Now, what I mean by this epidemic is that obviously the first figure that we got to look at is, and I'll try to be as factual here as I possibly can, and then I'll give my opinions. The first thing that we've got to understand is that 10% of the entire workforce, hospitality workforce in the UK, leaves the industry every year. No, actually, I'll state that correctly. 10,000 chefs leave the industry every year, which is 10% of the entire workforce in the UK in the hospitality industry. Just a fucking mental thing, if you think about it. It's mental. Like, I don't know, like, we were to try and look at under, like, literally, they were chefs for years, they're no longer in the industry. You know, that's the attrition rate. And obviously, that goes hand in hand with, I don't know the figures off by heart with in terms of
how on earth is there still an industry with numbers like that? That's fucking crazy.
It's insanity. And yeah, with that in mind, there's also, you know, a scary amount of suicides. You know, and suicide rates are on the rise worldwide, but amongst chefs, it's fucking scary as well. You know, and from my own personal, in the past 2 years, you know, the amount of conversations that I've had with chefs on the phone, consults with chefs on the phone. Ella now is helping me out with those consults, and she's taking them herself. And it's like, people are fucking, you would not believe, and I would say 8 out of 10 struggle mentally in some way, shape or form. I would say 3 or 4 out of 10, you know, and I confidently say 3 or 4 out of 10 have had some kind of suicidal thought, and really, really struggle with depression, really, really struggle with anxiety. So it's a real fucking problem. It's a real issue that's, I honestly feel, that's not being addressed in the correct way. You know, I think it's important that we have a conversation, which is what's happening now. And obviously my page, like Chef It's page, is very much about, you know, the practical side of dealing with your shit and getting your life together. You know what I mean? And I always believe, and I'm going to voice my opinion after this, it's probably going to contrary a lot of people. It's probably going to ruffle a couple of feathers. It is what it is. It's my opinion because I've fucking proven it to work. But the conversation is being opened, and I hope the stigma is kind of going away. But I still hear fucking horror stories all the time. You know, a message from a chef the other day, he was kind of saying like he's used up all his sick days. He tried to tell his head chef that he's struggling mentally. So did his he's pretty heavily depressed. He's on medication for depression, and he basically he was told if you take another 6 days, don't bother coming back. You know what I mean? Like there is an old school mentality that is slowly but surely being broken down. And I don't mean old school work ethic. There's definitely a degree of, you need to be willing to push, and there's always a time and a place for that. But when you're trying to disregard the fact that someone's seriously under pressure because you don't want to deal with it, even though you're supposed to be a leader, like that's fucking bullshit, if you ask me. You know what I mean? That is bollocks. And I think the conversation is definitely being open, but there's definitely still a problem within this industry. So as I said before, the old school mentality, that old school chef mentality is that of a dying breed. You know what I mean? Maybe the way you would have came up, Peter, with the people you would have worked with, and that mindset that you would have come across so many times where it's just, yourself.
You get that pushback. You get that pushback from your head chefs, your managers all the time. Another scary thing, Cam, is that among the chefs themselves, among us, among ourselves, the mental health side of it, it's an ongoing joke. It's not serious. It's like FML, fucking hell. That's the way it's dealt with chefs. Like chefs joke about it, about how fucked up it is.
100%.
And no one goes, actually, do you know what? That's serious, no?
Yeah.
But you can't do that because then you're kind of showing this weakness that old school chefs can't show.
Don't want to show. Yeah, exactly. 100%. I think
and that's a barrier. That's a wall.
There's a couple of things here that we need to touch on. Like, the first and foremost, the thing to blame, in my opinion, is the industry as a whole. And I'm not saying every employer, but I'm saying a lot of employers are to blame. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think this industry needs to change how it does business. I think places need to change how they do business. The only examples that I've had first-hand experience of, again, I always try and model my brother Keelan, who's got Variety Jones. They won the Michelin star recently. He's the head chef and owner of the place. And any place he's worked, he's always fought to try and get 4-day week for people in the kitchen. You know what I mean? And trying to allow more time for your fucking life. Because I think the first and foremost, the biggest issue that people have in terms of causing the issues in their head is you're so overworked and you're so burnt out that it literally, not only is the work extremely stressful and draining, but you're doing so much of it that not only do you have fuck all time outside of that, but on top of having fuck all time, you've also got no energy to make use of the fucking time. And as a result of not having any time and not being able to make use of the little time that you have, you isolate. You fucking isolate yourself. And on top of isolating yourself, you've also got devices. So years of isolation, socially or relationships or whatever the fuck, and vices like, yourself, the sugar, the picking, drinking to wind down. Maybe you're smoking cigarettes, you might be smoking weed, whatever your vice is, that slowly starts to get a fucking noose around your neck. And the isolation in combination with that is the fucking recipe for disaster mentally. It's the recipe for a serious problem in your head, where you are going to be seriously dark and negative in your mindset. And that's going to lead to bouts of serious depression, anxiety over small things. Maybe you're anxious about being social again. Like, that's how locked in you are. And that all stems from, in my opinion, that chefs are being overworked and usually underpaid, but that's not necessarily the point right now. It's generally that you're being overworked. It's generally that you're being, there's too much expected of you with not enough given back. And on top of the work conditions, there's also, and this is what B&L has been trying to do since we got over to Australia, is by having a bigger impact in the industry and help more chefs, we actually need to be looking at restaurant groups. And we can help individual chefs, but it's like, ultimately, my message is we need to fucking start looking at the industry as a whole. Like, employers and restaurant groups that have big budgets, that have fucking, anywhere from 10 to 100 premises within the group, like, they've all got kitchen staff. And I guarantee you that there's no wellness program in place for any of those kitchen staff or service staff. Front of house as well deal with very similar problems. Like, I guarantee there's nothing there. There's probably not. And for me, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. And people were kind of, they're like, oh, we don't have time. I remember, I think a CEO or a group we were talking to said, they just don't have time for this right now. That was the line we got back from them. And it's like,
or do you know how much that would cost us?
Yeah, something along those lines. And it's like, motherfucker, you are losing your best staff on a yearly basis. And not only that, but a lot of them are extremely unhappy, unhealthy, and in a dark place. And it's as a result of your lack of care. That's the truth. It's a result of your lack of care. You're not fucking looking after people. Why do you go to like, I used to work in personal training in Baggot Street in Dublin. So it's fucking like center of a lot of the corporate heads, people who work in offices, banks, shit like that. A lot of, people on good money working in corporate jobs. Every single one of those motherfuckers had some form of wellness program. I used to go and speak in these companies. Like I used to go in to fucking Bank of Ireland, AIB, used to go into pharmaceutical companies on their lunch break, and I'd give them 1 to 2 hour seminars that were paid for by their HR, their human resources department. I would send them an email and say, listen, this is what I could do. I can come in, I can talk, I can give a talk on this, I can give practical programs out after. If people are serious about their fitness, listen, the deal would be they can have this flyer from ours, they could do a free trial with us, whatever. The thing was, it's like all of these places were super open to having someone in to talk about health and wellness because they take it fucking seriously. Not only for companies is it tax deductible, like they can benefit tax-wise from having wellness programs in place, but they make a thing of doing it. Because the happier your staff are, and the healthier your staff are, the happier they're going to be. The happier they're going to be, the harder they're going to work, and the longer they're going to work for you. So it's like, in the service industry, in the hospitality industry, it's like, fuck it. It's like, what? Fuck are you talking about? To me, that's mental. That's mental. That's the mentality still. Because the facts are in front of your face. It's right in front of you. It's clear. You're losing your best staff, and half of them are on the fucking, they're on the edge. It's not good enough, So for me personally, my opinion is that the reason that this is happening is it has to come from the top first and foremost. Has to come from the top first and foremost, and it's not right now. That's why we have a big fucking problem. So sorry, go ahead.
What do you think, about causation, right? So with young chefs getting into the trade, getting into the industry, there is this is very general, of course, but there is a type of person that becomes chefs, right? Okay. And I'm not generalizing whatsoever. I'm just saying that people that didn't do amazing in school, people that aren't like they're clever or smart, but not book smart, but really good at their hands. This type of person that would get into it. Yeah, and then they're very easily taken advantage of at the base level of the industry where it comes to small restaurants, because you don't start off going into a big company or into a contract catering job, because you have to have the experience to get in there, and then by then your head could already be in the wrong place. But with younger, big time, you're already programmed, because as we spoke about before, when you start in the restaurants, it's dog eat dog. There's no union. There's nobody standing up for you. It's dog eat dog. You have to go in and you have to be better than him, or you have to undercut him, or you have to work harder and longer than him, or he gets the job, and he gets the hours, and he gets the money. And then it's, I see a lot of it stems from the very young age as well. But that's not to say that it's not the industry's fault. I'm not saying that it's the chef's fault. It's just there is something there with the type of person that most chefs are. Not all chefs, of course.
Totally, 100%. I think that's a very good point. That a lot of chefs that end up in this trade, obviously it's something that they're passionate about and they want to do, but ultimately I find, I think a lot of chefs kind of get taken advantage of early doors with that program. You know what I mean? Because there's not necessarily someone there to, you've got a lot of working class lads come in and start working, or girls or whatever. They come in, there's no one to fucking show them, hey, this is how you can progress within your career, or here's how to manage this. And there's none of that. There's no fucking life. It's, as I said, it's sink or swim. Do you fast forward 10 or 15 years and you got a young family and you got a fucking relationship and you're making fuck all money, you know, and you're burnt out. It's like you end up in that shitty situation, and it's like, fuck, man, that's not good. I would say definitely. I think there's a new. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a bubble. That's all I was going to say. It is a bubble that you get sucked into it from the very, very start.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of recruitment companies are doing their best at the moment. I know something I've spoken to are doing their best to try and incorporate this as, like, they'd have chefs maybe that come out of, they're doing fucking culinary arts, you know, DIT in Dublin or wherever you're studying it. And they do their best to try and educate people now on, you know, how to go about pursuing certain things in your career so you're not getting fucked over. Maybe how to take better care of yourself. Because a lot of it initially is awareness. That lad, Sean Brock, the American lad, he's fucking, he's one of the best chefs in the world, apparently. He's an episode of Chef's Table on him. And I remember watching the episode of Chef's Table, and I remember watching it going, this lad he used to model himself as, like, never any time off, never any days off, none. Like, just drill himself into the fucking floor for the craft, 16, 18-hour days, non-stop, 7 days a week for years on end. And eventually the lad, you know, I was watching, like, this cunt is going to fucking explode one of these days. There's no way you can operate like that for that amount of time. And he did. His body ended up fucking breaking down. His nervous system ended up breaking down. He ended up having a breakdown. And he's now coming out and saying this was like Mr. Drill yourself into the fucking ground chef. And now he's talking about he had to understand how his nervous system works. He had to understand how to recover properly, you know, and take care of himself so he's actually able to sustain his ability and fucking work, you know. And he's coming out and saying that right now. And I think that's such a good, not that it's good that it happened to him, but it's good for other chefs to see that was the guy with the mentality of, you know, fuck it, this is what you do. And then he ended up breaking the fuck down. And now look what happened. And now he's able to talk about it. So why that's important is that it's going to be a couple of years before the industry is actually changing. You know what I mean? I hope to be part of that. But it's going to be a couple of years before the industry changes thoroughly and starts taking care of staff the way it should be taking care of staff. Employers start taking care of people the way they should be taking care of people. Whether that be fairer hours, for more pay, so you don't have to work a fucking 80-hour week just to pay your bills. You know what I mean? Whether that be, you know, having some level of wellness in place where it's like, okay, cool, you get your 2 days in a row. You know, we have some kind of program that we can give you that allows you to fucking understand how to take care of yourself so you're not just riding yourself into the fucking rocks. That, I don't think is going to happen for a couple of years. So, in the meantime, a lot of the times, unfortunately, it falls down to the chefs. You know, it falls down to the individual. And I've spoken to a lot of individuals who are now part of the tribe who have made that jump, you know what I mean? Who were in that place where they were isolated, they were fucked, they were depressed, they were anxious, and they were on the end of their tether. And at that point, they had nowhere to turn, you know. Some of them had talked to psychologists without really anything coming off. They would feel better after the conversation, but it wasn't fixing anything, but they were still stuck in the same patterns, the same habits that they were in before, you know, and they had no one to really turn to, and they kind of turned to chef fit. And when I look at those same people, me and you know a few, that months, 3, 6, 12 months later, those people are in completely different places in their life, you know, completely different places.
Yeah.
And the reason for that, so I'm going to dive into my opinion on how this is going to sort itself out, how you can sort yourself out in terms of your mental health. Action. As hard as it might seem, as hardline as this might sound, action. Action is fucking vital in every aspect of your life. But when it comes to addressing the problems that you're dealing with right now, chef, action is the key. And the problem that I see in the industry and this, you know, in the industry and overall around the world is that, let's say, before fucking 2013, 2014, no one talked about mental health. No one was talking about having anxiety. No one was talking about suffering with depression. It wasn't really spoken about. And then over the course of fucking 5 to 7 years, with the influence of a load of wank biscuits on Instagram, it suddenly started to become in vogue to talk about your fucking hashtag anxiety. Do you know what I mean? Hashtag talk. Like, the truth is, it became a badge of honor then to say, oh, you know, I had a stressful day, you know, and fucking, I must be depressed. Like, there's a lot of this. I think there's a lot of stuff that's blown out of proportion to get attention, not by chefs, but just by like a lot of fucking Instagram people in general. That I think it's created the wrong conversation, in my opinion, about mental health. You know, it's created a almost victim culture where, and this is where I'm going to ruffle a few feathers, where people begin to identify with the thing that they're experiencing. For example, every single human being experiences anxiety at some point or another. I experience anxiety, you know, every couple of days. Peter experiences anxiety. Might have something going on at work. Might have fucking, you know, a lot of shit on his plate. Woke up, didn't have a good night's sleep. Woke up, his headspace is all over the place, and he's overthinking everything. You know, that anxiety starts to creep in. The chest gets fucking tight. You're overthinking things. You're not smiling because you're stressed. You're physically in a bad place. Now, understand for a second that when you are experiencing that, you got to understand that it's a state of mind that you're going through, and it's not defining you as a person. What's happening right now with mental health is that people are identifying with the thing they're experiencing. So instead of going, I'm experiencing anxiety, they're going, I'm an anxious person, you know? And instead of going, I'm experiencing a bout of depression, they're going, I'm a depressed person. Now, you need to be very careful with the language that you use with yourself, because especially for chefs, you know, if you start going down the route of, well, I'm a depressed person, it makes you a victim and it makes you powerless. Whereas, and I know myself, I have fucking dark bouts, I have dark periods, I have fucking spaces where life is not going good for me. You know what I mean? Like, that happens. It happens to everyone. Life is like that. You know, it's not always good. It's a fucking roller coaster. And I've had dark periods in my life where I was shutting down and I wasn't in a fucking good place. But the second that I start going, well, this is just my life. This is just, I'm just depressed. And yeah, that's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you're now laying out for yourself. By saying that, what's going to start happening now is you're going to be depressed all the time because you're willing it to happen to yourself, because that's who you think you are now. And that's not correct. That's not correct at all. So
instead of the why.
Instead of, you know, why am I depressed? Exactly. Why am I depressed? Well, for a lot of chefs, there's a multitude of factors. I think one of the biggest ones is lifestyle, you know, in combination. So obviously you have the classic fucking hashtag chef life that everyone buys into as a programming, where you're, you know, vices to cope, stress, long fucking hours. You've got no headspace in your personal life, so you're not connecting with the people in your family or your friends. You're not in a good space in terms of the things you're going through work-wise and in your personal life. On top of that, then your lifestyle is extremely negative. Eating shit, a lot of coffee, energy drinks, smokes, drugs whenever you can, drinking, whatever. You end up stuck in a rut there. And then as a result of those two things, physically you end up in a bad place where maybe you don't have confidence in yourself. You're not happy with what you're seeing in the mirror anymore. You've got no energy and you're generally in a negative headspace. That is the recipe for you being depressed. Now, the key thing to ask, as Peter said, is why is that happening? Well, I would always argue that you've got to question how you're living your life first and foremost. You know what I mean? If you're living your life in a very, very negative way, then obviously it's going to produce negative results. Like the amount of chefs that I've spoken to that, oh man, I'm so depressed and I don't know why. Okay, well, let's do a bit of an audit here. Like, do you exercise at any point in the week? Nah, man, I haven't exercised in years. Just doesn't work for me. Okay. You know, talk to me about what your nutrition's been like. Oh, well, breakfast is a coffee and a cigarette. I'll go into work then and I'll have a bit of bread. And then I'll have, you know, more coffee, energy drinks. I'll pick at some crisps during the day. Don't really get any time to eat. Get home at night, I'll order a kebab or a fucking pizza because I'm starving and the adrenaline's wearing off, and I'll wash that down with a beer and a joint. You know, and it's like that's what you find yourself doing on a daily basis. In my opinion, if I was to do that for 2 days, I would be depressed. Honestly. That's where I would be at. So when you do a quick audit on where you're at, you got to understand that how you're living your life is one of the biggest influences on how you feel mentally. If you're living your life in a negative, unhealthy way, then do not expect your mind to follow suit. You're not bulletproof. You know what I mean? You're not bulletproof, and that will happen. You will end up in a dark space if you continue living your life like that. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second thing, looking forward, as I was saying, is that it's the wrong conversation. Not the wrong conversation. A conversation is important, but people begin to identify with this. I'm a depressed person. I'm an anxious person, and then it just becomes about talking about it. Yeah. Just becomes about, talking about it. And I get messages from chefs all the time. I get a mixture of messages from chefs all the time. Some chefs will message me and say, I saw your videos. I remember I did a video in a group called Chef Dark. I don't post there anymore because I didn't like, there's just a lot of fucking negative cunts in there, basically. But there was some really great people in that group. Yeah, it was very toxic. So I decided to say, fuck it, this isn't actually worth my headspace. Anyway, there was some great people in that group, and I did get some amazing messages. The first video I did in there was talking about depression in the service industry, and that kind of went viral. I think it got over 1,000 likes or something like that, and hundreds of shares, loads of comments. Anyway, from that video, the videos that followed it, I remember I would get a lot of messages personally on Facebook, not chefs who were in chef-ip, but just chefs who've been watching the videos. And these chefs who were in a dark space had not heard anyone explain their life maybe the way I had explained their life. And they were messaging me going, man, look, I've been watching the fucking videos, and Jesus Christ, it's actually inspired me to really change my ways. It's to kick up the arse that I needed. I stopped drinking booze. I stopped doing drugs. I started exercising multiple times a week. I started eating better food. I stopped taking the piss. Started respecting myself, and I started going to sleep. And I started writing down the fucking list of shit that needs to be done on a daily basis, that mise en place in personal life thing that you talk about. These are the people who watch videos, and they're like, man, like my headspace is so fucking clear. I feel so much better. I was depressed before and anxious. Now I'm feeling good. That's the shit that's incredible to hear. The key thing that you need to understand, though, is those chefs took action. I also received messages from chefs that just want to fucking talk to someone. And I get that. I understand that. I understand. So sometimes I'll get a personal message that's just like, my mental health is so bad. Okay, I get you, man. I'm here. I'll hear you out. Let me explain the situation to me. And again, it's going back into this the ruffle and feathers thing. It's going back into this victim mentality. Talking about your problems is the first step to fixing it. But if you just talk and you don't do fuck all about it, then nothing's going to happen. Honestly, that's a fact. I got a message the other day, and it's like that guy. I get a message from a guy who's telling me that his boss doesn't want to know about his depression. I'm like, okay, cool, I get it, brother, I get it. Here's what I want you to do. So I took 5 minutes, which for someone who isn't a client of mine, who I don't talk to normally, who doesn't know me, and I gave him the time. I heard him out, and I sent him a fucking instruction voice note, and I said, listen, this is what I want you to do. First and foremost, you get the fuck out of that place you're working in. You stop working for that cunt. Nobody's worth your headspace. And if they're not willing to respect you, then game over. Get the fuck out of there now. Secondly, we got to look at how you're living your life. And I gave the instructions that I would give to any chef who's trying to get their shit together. It's like, what are you doing on a weekly basis, on a daily basis? I guarantee you that you're living your life in a very negative way. You're eating shit. You're staying up late. You're not sleeping. You're not exercising. You're not organizing yourself. So let's start with this. And I gave them 3 or 4 simple tasks, and it's like, oh yeah, I'll do that. But can I give you a ring? And it's like, not really. It's like, I understand. I'm not a counselor necessarily. Like I'm not here for that. But like, can you execute on what I'm telling you to do? Because if you do what I'm telling you, things are going to improve drastically. And it was this kind of attitude of, oh well, that's not what I wanted to hear. Like a thing of like, you're experiencing this problem, but you're not really willing to do the work to overcome the problem. So therefore, because you're not willing to do the work, the problem is going to persist, and you're going to end up stuck in this dark place. So many chefs end up in that place. I'm not saying maybe if you have a chemical imbalance and it's something you've dealt with your whole life, I understand. Listen, that's not what I'm qualified to deal with. However, I am very qualified to deal with chefs who are in a dark place as a result of the life that they live. And if you're not willing to change how you live your life, then don't fucking expect something to change. You know, honestly, do not expect something to change. Talking is the first part. The consults that I have with chefs, that's the first step, where I audit your life and I talk you through, go through all the problems, get the clarity on where the problems are coming from, set clear goals for the future, and then customize a plan dependent on what you need. That talk, it could be 45 minutes to an hour. That's the free consult that we do with ChefFit, for anyone that looks to join. You know, it's like, that's the first step to talking about it. But if I just have a consult with someone, how many people have I had a fucking consult with who didn't join ChefFit? Now check in on those motherfuckers 3 months later and they haven't done fuck all. And that's the problem. You haven't done fuck all. Yeah? Because key to change is action. You've got to put plans of action in place to change your life. Things are not going to change by just having a chat with someone. It will make you feel better in the short term. It might allow you to unburden the things that you're dealing with, and that's important. And I encourage anyone who's struggling, who's not talking about their problems, to talk about their problems. Don't get me twisted here. But if you're going to talk about the problem, then you got to also take action on the problem, because that's how it gets fixed. And that's where I kind of differ from a lot of people, because I'm very practical. I'm not here to I'm not a victim. I'm not someone who wears all my horrors on my chest and I go, oh, look at me, I'm so fucking this and I'm so that. You know, I'm resilient and I get that. But the idea is that if I need to talk about something, cool, that's the first step, but you got to follow that up with something. You know what I mean? You got to follow that up with something.
You know, many chefs, including myself, I'd say 90% of the people that you would consult, when they see your videos, especially the one you talked about earlier, for a lot of people, including myself, that is the first time that it's said out loud.
Yeah.
Because the chefs don't talk about it themselves, they don't talk about it amongst other people, and they don't see it as something that can be fixed. So you'd have, like, they're alone. Do you know what I mean? They are alone, and when they hear it for the first time, they're like, "Well, I am. Maybe I am." And then it could only dawn on them then. Like, this could be something that they've been suffering with for 10, 15 years and not thought that it was something that they were suffering with. As you said, they just think that that's who they are.
Nice.
I'm anxious.
Yeah.
Do you know, I'm anxious. That's the way, that's how a lot of people come into ChefFit as well, saying that they are anxious or they are depressed, rather than, you know, what's up with me? What can I do? Why? Sorry, not what can I do? Why? Why am I like this? And they just haven't thought about it yet, you know, because they didn't recognize it as something that can be targeted exactly. Because before that, it's everything. It's a bubble that you're in, and it's everything. It's who you are. It's the way you are, and it's the way you've always been as far as you can remember. Because when you leave school or whatever it is and start as a chef, that's when your life, your adulthood started.
Yeah, totally.
Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
It's massive, 100%.
Like. 100%. I think that is a good point, that there is a lot of chefs who maybe are unaware, especially older chefs, you know what I mean, who are unaware of the situation that they're in or what they're experiencing. They mightn't actually be going, hey, I'm depressed. They just fucking are. You know, those chefs who are extremely negative that you deal with. A lot of those chefs have been beaten down by the industry. They've been beaten down over years of being in the fucking kitchen, and that's just how they are. And they mightn't have ever, you know, totted up that maybe they're struggling mentally. You know what I mean? This is just fucking life. And life is hard. There is adversity. I get that 100%. But if you find yourself in that mold, you know, yeah, there's definitely a degree of things are not going right for you, and maybe you are experiencing something mentally. So yeah, 100% on that. But I honestly feel, from the bottom of my heart, and I will fucking die on this hill, that if you decide that whatever you're experiencing determines your life or defines you as a person, you know, if you decide to fucking define yourself by how you feel, that will paralyze you from doing something about it, you know? And I want you to really think about this. Like, maybe you are one of those chefs that Peter just mentioned who isn't totally aware of what they're going through. It's like, On a day-to-day basis, out of 10, how do you actually feel waking up out of bed? Like a 1 or a 0 is like, I actually probably am struggling to see myself through this day and I don't want to get out of bed. 10 being, I'm living the best life I could possibly live. Like, I love my life right now and I can't wait to get after it. If I was to ask you that, where would you be? And I know a lot of chefs who I speak to are probably somewhere between 1 and 3. 1 and 3. And if you're in that position and you haven't come to the realization in your mind, well, that is the moment. That is the moment where you go, okay, well, maybe I need to do something here. Maybe something needs to change. That's not life, guys. That's not life. Life is supposed to have adversity. Life is supposed to be hard, but life is also supposed to be beautiful, and life is also supposed to be great, and it's supposed to be something to be enjoyed. And if you're not enjoying it and you haven't enjoyed it for years on end, understand that it's possible for you to change that. Understand that it's possible for you to change that. So in that position, it's about becoming aware. And if you're already aware, then it's about not identifying with what you're aware of. It's about trying to fucking identify it and fix it, not identify it and dwell on it. That's my message. And the unfortunate thing here is that, like working in this industry forces you to do, you have to take the high road. You have to generally work harder than someone doing a 9 to 5. And that same battle happens within your mental health, because you don't necessarily have an employer who's willing to stand up for you right now. So unfortunately, that leaves it on your shoulders for you to fix. It is a fucking burden to bear, but that is the reality for a lot of us in this industry. And I think when you understand that, though, you can do something about it. Obviously, that's one of the main reasons that ChefFit exists. It's not just about fitness, it's about giving you a new way of life. It's about giving you a new lifestyle change. It's about giving you a new community of people who go through the same things as you. And that's very, very powerful for changing people's lives. And maybe it's not directly a fix for mental health, but as I said, if the problem is stemming from how you live your life, ChefFit can help you change your life in a more positive and healthy way. Boom, maybe your headspace gets taken care of in the process. But guys, my big takeaway here, and my big thing to get across to people is, playing the victim stops you from fixing the problem. Talk about it, experience it, feel it, but in that moment of becoming aware of what you're going through, you have to have action plans in place to overcome. Whether that be a mixture of talking to people and having a better healthy lifestyle, whether that be joining ChefFit, whatever the fuck you decide to do. The action is the key. Other tools, I suppose we could just use this as we'll finish off with something practical. Like, Peter, anytime you've struggled, what are your go-tos for, like, if you have a day where it's like, fuck, anxiety to the roof, stress and work, any shit sleep last night, like what would you do to counteract that and try and put things right?
Hard cardio. That would be one of my things. Hard cardio. But I tend to let it go for days before I.
It's really
admit,
no,
I would let it go for days before I look at myself in the mirror and go, you're not in a good headplace right now. And as soon as I say to myself in the mirror, not in the mirror, normally it's when I'm on the bike. That's when I do all my thinking. You're in this heightened sense of awareness because you're trying not to get murdered by all these murder machines. So I'm driving past you. So my brain is working well. And that's when I notice that I haven't been in a good headspace. And I go, do you know what? You've been like this for a few fucking days. What are you going to do about it? And once I've said that to myself in my head out loud, that's when I swear to God, half of it is gone. And I'm already halfway to getting back to where I'm supposed to be. Do you know what I mean? It's like a conversation with myself.
Yeah. And I think another big thing that
but first I have to notice it. You know that way? I do let it go. I let it go for 3 or 4 days before I, Well, that doesn't help all. That just makes it get worse,
In ways, but I also think that's kind of human nature in ways. Sometimes you need to experience the pain of something for a sustained period of time before it's like, oh shit, right, I got to do something here. I think another important thing that I noticed, I remember one day you weren't feeling great, and I remember you messaged me about it, Which is another important thing that everyone should do. Like, you should have someone that you can fucking message. You know, no judgment.
Say it out loud, yeah, big time.
Say it out loud, and actually, what's the word I'm fucking looking for? Identify that it's actually happening. And I think Peter said that to me, and we were supposed to have a podcast, and I said, no, let's leave it till tomorrow, or let's leave it till Friday, and we'll get it done then. And he was like, grand. And he said, I'm going to go home and I'm going to sit on the ground with the kids. So I'm going to ground myself, which is really important, ground myself and spend the night with no phone with the kids. And it's like, fuck, that's a really good way of going about it. Get an early night, boom, clean slate tomorrow. You know what I mean? And it's like, once you're aware of it, then you got to look at what actions can I take to make myself feel better, you know, and overcome it. Because ultimately it's a state of mind. You know, and this is a big thing, as I was saying to people, and this is why I'm so adamant that you don't identify it, because it's state of mind. Life is like a fucking ocean. Some days it's choppy. Some days the water is clear. Some days the water is muggy. Some days it's really calm and beautiful. Some days the tide is in. Some days the tide is out. It changes depending on, you know, what fucking time of day it is, what week it is, what month it is. It doesn't matter. It's always going to be changing. And your mind is the same way. Human beings are emotional creatures. And we've got to understand that you can feel something and then tomorrow you can wake up and not feel that thing and feel something completely different. Once you understand that bad times don't last, fucking tough times don't last, tough people do, is a very true statement. You've got to have a mindset of, no, I can fucking endure this, I can go through this, and eventually it will come out correct tomorrow if I take the correct action, you know? Now, obviously, if you're suffering with the same mindset as in the tide is out and it's choppy water every fucking day of the week for months on end, okay, that's a severe situation. We got to do something about that. You know what I mean? We got to take a lot of action. We got to talk to someone. We got to see a psychologist. We got to fucking take better care of ourselves. You know, we got to take more action. But ultimately, in a lot of cases, you know, where it's not just a chemical imbalance and you're seriously in trouble. A lot of the time, it's about, you have the day or two where you feel like that. You have good days and bad days. On the bad days, you need to be able to ride out the wave and take the actions necessary to make sure that the next day you're waking up in a better space. And that's what I recommend that everyone does who's listening to this, you know. Don't fall victim to how you feel. Let's if it's not how you want to feel, cool. Feel it in that moment and let's seek to change it going forward. Guys, if any chefs are out there listening to this and you're enjoying the podcast, happy days, please subscribe to the channel, give us a thumbs up, share it on Facebook, share it on social media, subscribe to us on Podbean by creating a profile. If you're on iTunes, give us a 5-star review. And if anyone is interested in joining the Chef Fit Elite, go to our Facebook page and shoot us a message. And we will take care of you from there. You have a choice to do our 30-day challenge, a free 5-day challenge, or a 90-day challenge, depending on what's going to suit you. And again, you will have your free consultation with us, completely free of charge, 45-minute coaching call where we will go through your problems, give you clarity on that, set your goals with you, and then customize the plan to your needs. At that stage, if you're committed to making the change, we'll offer you a space and talk you through your options from there. So if anyone wants to do that, please go and do it. Check the Facebook page and get involved. That has been our episode for today. POBG. Any closing words? We all go, bro.
Back in the mix.
Boom.
All good, bro. All good.
Good to be back. Smashing episode. Good to be back. All right, folks. That's me. That's Peter. Stay safe, motherfuckers. See you later. Peace.